Hello and welcome to another Jog Vlog session. This is the next lesson in the weather hazards and climate change topic, which follows on from the introduction to drought. So now we know what drought is and how it's different from just arid environments in general, we're going to start to look at the causes of drought. So before you write the title, I've got 3 dingbats for you, which are all causes of drought. Let's see if you can get them. Okay, so the first one here is meteorological. Meteor, O, lodge, and eagle. Next one, here we go. The last part should be a bit easier. Okay, this is hydrological. High, drool, lodge, eagle. And the last one, this one is El Nino. El Nino. So these are terms that you may or may not have heard before, but again, we're going to define what these terms are and we're going to provide you a bit of detail as to how and why they cause or can cause drought. Alright, so there's your title. Make sure you've written that down, please, and then there's the learning objective underneath too. Once you have, unpause the screen and you can start the lesson. So the task you've got is fairly straightforward, and if you get onto 365, please make sure you get the resource for this, because it will save you doing a lot of writing. Now what I'd like you to do is, with the resource, which has got information about those 3 types of, well actually not El Nino, but 3 types of drought: meteorological, hydrological, or human. Okay, so these are all causes of drought conditions. Now I've given you 15 statements. 5 of those statements belong to meteorological, 5 belong to hydrological, and 5 belong to human. Now it says here on the task that you use a double page, 3 columns. That's sensible just to space out your notes nicely, with the overall title that you've got from the lesson anyway, Causes of Drought. And it says to cut out the statements and glue them under the right headings. I will give you the answers within this video, so if you want to just not glue them down so you don't get them wrong, then that's fine. If you don't want to bother cutting and sticking, or if you haven't got glue and scissors, but you have got highlighters, if you use a key, you can highlight the right ones, okay, as long as you've, like, you know, meteorological green, and then you highlight all the meteorological ones green, vice versa. Okay, so 5 statements for each heading. Have a go at working it out, and if you're not sure, then just still have a go anyway, and then when it's right you can either ink it in or glue it down or whatever it is you're doing. Right, and if you finish that, or you're fairly confident, then try and find links between the different causes of drought. So try and link, you know, even if they're under a different heading, a little link between one of them, maybe meteorological causes and a hydrological cause, for example. And in your link, try and explain it. So if one of the causes for, or factors about meteorological drought links to hydrological drought, then explain why you think it links. Alright, so that task should take you a good 10 minutes at least to do once you've found the resource. So do that activity now, please, and then when you're ready, unpause the screen and I will carry on and provide you with the answers. Okay, so here we go. Here is a summary of all the answers that you need. So meteorological drought, in the bold, is a definition of it. So meteorological drought is because of changes to the usual weather patterns of places. Meteorologists is the posh term for the weather people, the people that go on TV and present the weather to. So like Carol on BBC Breakfast or whatever, she is a meteorologist. That is her title, that is her science. So that is a definition, and again, always worthwhile having a definition. That's why it's in bold, really, because you could easily just be asked, what is this a definition for? Or it might ask you to define meteorological drought. So you need to know this, good for flashcards, that sort of thing. Now, meteorological drought, because it's about changes to the usual weather patterns of places, these next 4 fit under that category. So places have rainy or dry seasons, or places that have rainy or dry seasons are more vulnerable to drought because slight changes in weather have big impacts, but places that are normally dry like deserts are not as likely to have those droughts. This can change because of changes to atmospheric and oceanic circulation, which we should hopefully remember from one of the earlier lessons in this topic. Climate change means meteorological droughts are more frequent. Hopefully you found that one easy to place. And El Nino is a natural process that can also affect global weather and meteorological events, and I'll talk to you a bit more about El Nino shortly. So they all fit into the meteorological drought category. Hydrological drought is to do with the lower rivers and reservoirs. So specifically, hydrological drought is like water standing, okay, on the planet. So it's a big store of water either in rivers or in reservoirs. So it's not necessarily the water coming out of the sky, although invariably some of the water coming out of the sky does end up in rivers and reservoirs. So the cause of hydrological drought is also due to changes in weather patterns and less precipitation. That might have been something that you put under meteorological drought because it's to do with weather and it's to do with precipitation. But it clearly says hydrological drought can be due to weather and precipitation. Now that might have been one of the links you made between meteorological and hydrological drought. Hydrological drought can be less obvious straight away because it can take months for water levels to drop. So because it takes such a long time sometimes for the water that comes out of the sky and goes through the soil, can be percolated through rock, it can take ages to find its way into the river channel. If you have a drought event, it takes a while to necessarily catch up with the water that passes through the system. So river levels don't drop straight away. They can take weeks or even months before those levels will drop and you'll notice a problem. With less rainfall going into the soil, less is able to travel to rivers. Okay, so because it talks about rivers there, that's hydrological. And people using rivers for water have to rely on water stored underground or in reservoirs. So there you go, hydrological drought. Human causes of drought. Now, we obviously have a massive role here too, and it's not just about how much rain is coming out of the sky or how much water is stored in reservoirs and rivers. It's actually what we're taking out, and we take things out as humans all the time. So humans need water to survive, so we use it in many ways: drinking, growing and irrigating crops. We use it for industry, we use it to generate energy that we all use. So we are causing drought because of basically overuse. So building dams, we've done that as a flood defense, can create reservoir stores, but also it affects river levels downstream. So that could easily be a link, by the way, to hydrological drought, couldn't it? Because if you build a dam, you can build up a reservoir, but you can also lower the river levels further downstream. So that can create hydrological drought. But that's not natural. That's because we've done it as a human-orientated cause. Deforestation globally increases greenhouse gases by preventing trees from absorbing CO2. Again, that links to climate change, so that links to meteorological drought. So you can see how humans are affecting both hydrological and meteorological drought through things we are doing. Trees also help create rain by transpiration. If they're not there, the rainfall in the region can decrease. So yet another factor that explains why deforestation can link to meteorological drought, because trees release moisture into the atmosphere. Like transpiration is basically their version of sweating that humans do, and so they release that moisture into the atmosphere, and that creates rain. That's why the rainforests regularly rain. There's regular evapotranspiration going on. And then lastly, agriculture needs to use water for irrigation. When too much is used for crops, it leaves the area short. And that is absolutely something which has been noticed in a place called the Aral Sea, A-R-A-L. I would recommend you having a quick Google of the Aral Sea, just to see how it's changed over time. Essentially, it's a sea that just doesn't exist anymore because it's been overused for irrigation of crops. So I will allow you to Google that if you're interested in the overuse of water. It's a pretty remarkable thing. You can see satellite images of what it used to be like and now what it's like. It's essentially just like not there anymore. So there we go. Meteorological, hydrological and human drought, and all ways in which that drought can be affected. But also, don't just look at these things in isolation. They link together quite considerably. Rivers and reservoirs require water from the sky, but we can also take out from rivers and reservoirs by human causes. Rainfall can be created through transpiration, but when we chop down trees, that reduces it. So there are links between these. So hopefully your page is a big mess of lines and connections. Alright, so the last thing I want to talk to you about, and just mainly because it's interesting, is the phenomenon known as El Nino. Now, El Nino, you don't have to know a great deal about El Nino, thank goodness, but what you can see on this slide here is things to do with the El Nino phenomenon that occurred between 2015 and 2016. So, essentially, we can predict El Nino. It takes 6 months that we can to predict it, and it can last between sort of 9 months and 2 years. The El Nino of the 2015-2016 El Nino lasted until about May 2016. It leads to major issues, though. It can cause all sorts of problems, and drought is one of those factors. So it doesn't just bring drought; it also brings floods to places. And depending on when El Nino happens and where you are in the world, it will determine how affected you are by El Nino. So if you look at these green countries, which spans the entire globe, really, these are all countries that suffer major effects of El Nino, either flooding or drought. So in Zimbabwe, for example, which is in Africa, Zimbabwe, during the latest El Nino, or the 2016 El Nino, actually had 8,000 cows die as a result of hunger and thirst because of the drought. So it shows you the impact that can have, because obviously this is people's livelihoods, this is leads to human starvation, etc. Some places like southern and East Africa, again, Africa's always badly hit because of drought, had no harvest. Essentially, the food never got harvested, never got actually made it through. But flooding is the opposite. In Latin America, okay, during the last El Nino, so Latin America is like here, over this area, 150,000 people had to leave their homes because of flooding. But again, Africa wasn't, unfortunately, immune to the people leaving their homes. 180,000 in Ethiopia had to leave their homes because of drought. So you've got flooding and drought, all because of this thing called El Nino. So what I'd like you to do is find the video on Office 365 in the Jog Vlogs folder, or better yet, follow that, or not better yet, it's probably worse, but type in that YouTube address. And if none of these work, just go on YouTube and say, what is El Nino? And it will tell you. And effectively, it's all about how ocean temperatures in the Pacific change global weather patterns. So you're not going to need to know it in loads of detail at all, to be honest. You're just going to need to know that, okay, that El Nino and changes in global temperatures of oceans affect weather patterns. But it'd be useful for you to see it, and actually super interesting to know about what El Nino is. Okay, so once you've completed that particular section, then this lesson is done and you have completed drought causes. So well done, thank you for getting through it, and I will see you next time for another Jog Vlogs.